What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake. Today we'll be reading chapters 7 and 8 of Tomorrow, a Sandershead's fanfic by Bekka911. If you'd like to read along or enjoy the author for yourself, go ahead and use the links in the description to support them. There's also a link in the description to a Google form where you could, a Google, what's it called? Survey, sheet, form. I think it's a Google form. That's what it's called. I think my brain's doing a little loopy thing. I'm not sure. There's a Google form where you can recommend fics for the future. There's also going to be any trigger warnings that you may need to know in the description, so be sure to check that out. And with that, here comes chapter 7. He was subdued during dinner. It wasn't like he could help it. Deceit's poisonous words kept digging into his thoughts, and Patton felt suffocated by the gray cloud that trapped his thoughts. He didn't even feel like he was properly in the present. It was almost like he was floating above everything that had happened, everything that was going on. He wasn't a part of what was happening. It was all a dream. He thought that Virgil had once described something similar and labeled it as disassociation. Patton tried to brush it off, but it was hard. He caught himself just staring at his fingers in disbelief, wondering how they could look so lifelike. "Stop it," he scolded himself, shaking himself back to alertness. "You're just tired." It was true. Exhaustion dragged at him relentlessly, and Patton wondered if that was how Virgil felt all the time. If it was, then Patton felt nothing but sympathy, pity, and love for his shadowling. Patton, though, couldn't let himself falter. Not when Thomas was still shaky and everything that had happened was with the others. So Patton marched on, ignoring the nagging sense that this wasn't real, and he smiled and joked his way through the meal until Virgil called his bluff. "You're not happy right now, Patton," he said, looking slightly disappointed. Patton felt it like a blow to his chest. "You're not, are you?" Patton felt himself sort of deflate. "I'm not happy right now," he admitted. "But it's not a big thing. It's not Thomas or anything, I promise." Virgil's lips thinned to a disapproving line. Roman, who was clearing the table, put a hand on the anxious side's shoulder in a silent warning. "Patton," the royal said lightly, "we care about you as well, and not just because you're a part of Thomas. We care about you as one of our friends. When you're not happy, we want to figure out why and then make it better." Virgil said, "I thought we'd gotten past the lying and masks." He sounded hurt, and Patton winced slightly. How could he listen to deceit? "I'm sorry, it's just a habit, you know?" The two stared at him suspiciously, but it was Logan who leaned forward and said, "Liar." Patton gaped at the logical side, because only Logan knew that Patton was going through something, and it was Logan who was most likely to share it with the group. After all, Logan was less familiar with emotions, and therefore he couldn't properly calculate what the reaction would be. "Stop," Patton said, letting the facade fall away completely. Desperation clawed at his throat. He swallowed sharply, laying a trembling hand over Logan's. "Logan, please don't." Logan just frowned at him, concern shining in his eyes. "I refuse to stay silent while you're struggling. I like to think that I've learned my lesson after the incident with Virgil." Virgil shook off Roman's hand and braced his arms on the table. "What is happening?" Patton sent one more pleading look at Logan, but the teacher was already turned away, addressing Virgil and Roman directly. "Patton came to me recently," he began, worried that something was wrong with him. There wasn't, of course, and I was easily able to identify where his negative emotions were coming from. Virgil especially will know about repression, yes? Virgil nodded. "Roman?" "I understand the concept," the royal said. "Good. I identified both repression and denial. This concerned me slightly, because both can be unhealthy and potentially dangerous for Patton. After a more in-depth discussion with Patton, I concluded that he wasn't at risk of being overwhelmed by either. Virgil let out a heavy sigh of relief. Logan continued. However, he mentioned that his chest hurt, and that he'd been speaking with deceit. Deceit? Patton shriveled up. Virgil hissed, the restrained panic on his face breaking free. Patton, why are you speaking with deceit? Patton didn't really know what to say to defend himself. It's not like I went looking for him. He came to me. And you didn't tell us? Patton, you know he can't be trusted. I know. Patton rubbed his eyes, feeling tired. I know. I didn't believe a word he said, though, and that's the truth. I guess I'm feeling a little vulnerable and emotional since my bad day. Sorry. Logan cleared his throat, gentling his voice. Patton, I don't believe Virgil was angry at you. I think rather he was simply panicked about deceit hurting you or influencing you. Patton managed a small smile. Yeah, okay. They were all quiet for a moment. Patton didn't dare lift his gaze from the table, afraid that eye contact would shatter the fragile hold he had over the situation inside his head. He heard a rustle of fabric as Virgil leaned back and Roman took a seat once more. Virgil's voice was small, but insistent. There's more. I know there's more. Patton didn't say anything. Pat, you have to tell us these things. I worry about you. How dull it was to play you. What, with the others rendering you as nothing more than an over-emotional fool who knew nothing of value? Deceit had said. Patton had refused to believe it at first, but here, now, he wondered. Because they all did. They still insisted on treating him like he was some fragile child who couldn't handle the big bad snake. He didn't need them babying him. You don't need to worry about me, kiddo, Patton said, trying desperately to keep his toxic anger at bay. It wasn't totally their fault, but there was such a stupid amount of protectiveness on Virgil's face, and it chafed around Patton's wrist as if a blatant emotion had shackled him. I can handle things on my own without breaking. Virgil bit the inside of his cheek. I know that you can handle things, he said slowly, as if he knew that he was treading dangerous waters. But I don't want you to be alone while you're struggling. I know how hard that can be. Patton couldn't help it. Virgil was acting as if Patton couldn't handle serious matters. It all had to be delicate for Patton. It all had to be dumbed down for Patton. Everything had to be light and fluffy and easy for Patton, because obviously they knew better than he did. So, I'm comparing myself to you now? He asked, maliciously, raising his chin as Virgil went very, very still. God, Patton hated that this is how he was reacting, but he was tired. He could hear Deceit laughing. And he was so sick of being treated as less because they all thought he couldn't handle it. Believe it or not, Virgil, I am capable of keeping myself in check. I know that you went through an ordeal, and I'm sorry that we were stupid enough to allow it, but this is different. Just because you did it first doesn't mean I have to be babied through it as if I can't do it second. Patton, Roman started, but Patton cut him off, because the words were tumbling out in a rush, because Patton had held them back for far too long. Maybe it made him no better than Deceit. Maybe it made him worse than Deceit. At this point, Patton couldn't stop. I am tired of being coddled through tough situations. I know that I need support a lot. I know that I'm emotional and I act like a fool a lot of the time, but I'm not glass. I know that I don't like to acknowledge when something's wrong. I know that I focus on the positives too much and that it's not healthy to ignore the negatives, but that doesn't mean you get to decide what I can and can't handle. I know that I'm not as smart as you, Logan, but I'm not an idiot. I just have different views, different insights. You guys can't rule me out just because you think that my job as part of Thomas is just to be happy all the time. It's hard to be me, but I've dealt with it, and now here you all are, acting as if I can't carry a pebble despite the fact I've been carrying a boulder for years. Silence. Patton took heavy breaths, because that wasn't all of it, but he was too horrified to say more. He'd just, oh my God, he needed to go. He needed to go. He shoved away from the table and fled, wishing that the feeling twisting stomach and the knots didn't seem to be so similar to glee. He'd ruined everything, yet he couldn't bring himself to feel guilty over it. He just sort of felt numb. That didn't happen, he insisted. It didn't happen and everything will be fine tomorrow. I just need to wake up. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. Chapter 8. The three of them sat horrified in silence for a good long while. Virgil was still, his eyes staring vacantly at the table, even when Roman reached across and tapped his cheek gently. Logan sat, apparently unruffled, with his hands steeply in front of his mouth, thoughtfully. He hadn't taken offense from Patton's rather aggressive outbursts, and so he needed less time to comprehend the situation and then begin to analyze. "There is something very wrong," he said eventually, and Prince shot him a half-hearted glare. "Really?" Logan sighed and adjusted his glasses, and Roman continued to try and get Virgil out of whatever state Patton's words had put him in. It was useless, because Virgil was very, very far away from them right now, lost somewhere Roman couldn't reach him. Logan motioned for Princey to leave Virgil alone for now. "He needs time to deal," he explained easily when Roman looked confused. "Just let him be for now. He'll come back to us eventually." "What do we do about Patton?" Roman asked, and there was no bravo in his voice. "He's never blown up like that." It took Logan a second to comprehend the idiom. "Yes, I believe it was simply a result of his ongoing repression. He gets troubled easily, and usually tends to ignore that he needs to address such troubles. He likes to be positive and hates to focus on the negative, leading to a situation like this, where all his negativity becomes too much for him, and he has to let it out somehow." Roman didn't look quite convinced, but has acquiesced with a small nod. Virgil twitched slightly, his eyes coming into focus rather rapidly. His hands were shaking. Logan noticed that almost instantly, despite the fact that Virgil was pressing them into the table hard enough for his wrist to crack. His fingers were white with the pressure, his shoulders hunched up. "Virgil?" Roman's voice was careful, his touch gentle as he brushed it against the anxious side's shoulder. "Virgil, are you okay?" Virgil didn't make any drastic movements, like nod, but Logan noted that his entire body was trembling now, racked with minute shivers. Panic attack. He leaned forward, using his own hand to nudge Roman away. He kept his arms in Virgil's view, and kept his voice soothing, as he said, "Virgil, listen to me. You're okay. You're safe. You're having a panic attack?" Princey made a small noise. Logan continued, drawing what he'd learned after the extensive research performed after the whole anxiety pills incident. "Do you remember your breathing exercises? In for 4 seconds. He waited for Virgil to follow his instruction. Hold for 7 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. Good job, Virgil. You are doing well. He made sure Virgil was continuing the pattern as he slowly laid his hands on top of the ones pressed onto the table. Virgil's breathing stuttered at the contact, but Logan urged him to keep counting. Gradually, Virgil's breathing eased. Logan kept his hands where they were, allowing the anxious side to choose what to do from here. Virgil didn't ask him to shift his hands away. Sorry, he mumbled, sinking into his hoodie. Once he'd regained his composure, embarrassment was plastered all over him. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I overreacted. I'm sorry. Roman offered his hand, and Virgil allowed him to place it on the junction between his shoulder and his neck. There's nothing to be sorry for, Roman promised earnestly. I fight dragon witches, you fight panic attacks. There's different kinds of bravery, Virgil. Virgil let out a long breath before looking up at Logan. The logical trait didn't press the fact that Virgil couldn't quite meet his eyes. Thanks, Logan. It's no issue. I took it upon myself to learn about that after the earlier incident in which I instigated harmful actions due to ignorance. Roman is correct. There is no shame in having a panic attack, especially as you are Thomas's anxiety. Virgil shifted slightly, but otherwise gave no indication that he was uncomfortable. Still, he said, we need to help Patton. If he's talking to Deceit, then something's definitely wrong. Logan sighed and went to remove his hands. Virgil gripped on tightly and studiously refusing to meet his eyes. Logan just let his hands stay where they were. Patton is at risk, yes. He has the heart of Thomas's emotion, while also encompassing his morality. If Patton is compromised by strengthened negative emotions, then Thomas's moral compass may also be affected, and that is something we cannot afford. Now while Deceit is steadily ingraining himself in the forefront of Thomas's mind. Wow! Roman muttered, nudging Virgil slightly with a grin. And you guys say that I'm the dramatic one? It worked. Virgil's lips quirked upwards. Logan simply raised an eyebrow. You are the dramatic one. Roman emitted some kind of offensive noise, and Virgil sniggered slightly. Logan remained impassive, but not cold enough to hide the beginnings of a smug smile. Now, Virgil said, quietly determined. About Patton. Patton was not having a good time. Guilt was swamping him, looming over him like a wave that was almost cresting. He would drown in it. He really would. He heard an almost silent hiss and felt that same poisonous anger race through him, spinning him into that gray cloud in his mind where nothing really mattered. Go away! He shouted to the shadows where the slippery snake hid. You've already poisoned me enough. I don't need you hissing in my ear. You got what you wanted. Leave me be. There was a small, victorious laugh before Deceit disappeared, leaving Patton to fall onto his bed and cry. Thomas was in the middle of cooking when he felt the overwhelming urge to curl up in a ball and cry. It was strange, but strong, and so he left the stove, turning it off, and sat on the sofa. He felt vacant, almost like his emotions weren't really there. He was disconnected from his body. He called up Joan because who else would he call besides one of his closest friends? What's up, Sanders? Thomas just sat, with the phone pressed to his ear, and cried. Thank you all so much for watching. I forgot this is like my favorite book, and I was like, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember why. This I love it so much. I love it. Gonna do some happy shakes. I'm doing some happy shakes. If you like this story too, go ahead and support the author using the links in the description. If you want to support me in my endeavors, there is stuff in the description, including the link to my Etsy shop where I make beaded things, and that is cool. I do a little bead. I do a little bead here and there and everywhere. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Yeah, or listening, I guess. There is no watching to this. And much like Virgil, trying to like do a little earth, do your best.